It's okay. It's okay.
The subject of this speech is a topic which has been discovered recently and which may not exist at all. I may be talking about something that does not exist. Therefore, I'm free to say everything or nothing.
I'm sure you clicked on this video for any number of reasons, out of intrigue, the mystery of it all. Well, today, I am going to seek to put one question into doubt in your mind. Are any of us actually real? I'm sure this is something we've all thought of before, whether high or not. Who or what are we? Where do we come from? What is our purpose? Endless questions without answer.
I, in my stories and novels, often write about counterfeit worlds, semi-real worlds, as well as deranged private worlds, inhabited often by just one person, while meantime the other characters either remain in their own worlds throughout, or are somehow drawn into one of the peculiar ones.
How can we be sure that anything around us is real? Think about it. Your emotions that you feel every day, the situations that you find yourself in, the anger you feel when you fail at something, that is unmistakably real, right? You can feel it, burning up inside you, swirling the infinite inferno until the rage becomes you. But how do you know it's real? How do you know that the rage you feel is not simulated, given to you by someone or something without trigger, for any number of unknown reasons? Solipsism is a philosophical concept that challenges the way that humans perceive reality and the existence of other human beings. It postulates that one's own self is the only thing that can be known to exist with absolute certainty. It hypothesizes that the external world and other humans could merely be illusions, or created entirely by your own consciousness. But if the theory states that you cannot be certain that other humans are real and could just be a product of one's own mind, how can we be sure that our own mind is not a product of someone else's mind? Today, I am going to delve into this theory with experiences from other people to back my ideas up, just to give you a mindfuck to ponder for the rest of eternity. Let's break it down, shall we?
Prove to me that anything exists. He had been so caught up in this notion of a virtual world that maybe all of this is just mirage, that everything is just a computer simulation. Prove to me that anything exists, that I can trust anything. Cogito ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am.
One of the most famous philosophical propositions of all time, I think, therefore I am, coined by René Descartes, attempts to disprove solipsism using a core basis of thought. Descartes realized that he could doubt the existence of the external world, sensory experiences, and even the reliability of his own senses, but he could not doubt the act of thinking itself. Descartes begins his theory by casting doubt on everything that he believes to be true about the universe. He explains that an evil, omnipotent demon could possibly be deceiving him and his very perception of the universe, and creating illusions for him to fall for. Even though Descartes is now doubting the world and his existence, the one thing he cannot doubt is the fact that he himself is currently doubting, thinking. He must be thinking. Descartes concludes that the mere act of thinking itself serves as undeniable proof of his own existence. Without it, he could not think. From the certainty of his own thinking, Descartes derives the existence of the thinking I. He arrives at the conclusion that he exists as a thinking being, even if all his perceptions of the external world and other beliefs could potentially be illusory. Descartes' argument, however, relies heavily on circular reasoning and does not ponder further than the current moment of thinking, or seek to provide a broader answer to the nature of the self. Descartes' argument also does not account for the idea that even his own thinking could possibly be influenced by some other thing or being, even though, at that moment, he is thinking, existing. What kind of existence he has is completely unknown. The idea that his own thinking could be simulated by another being or thing is completely possible.
The strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following. That 40 years ago, we had Pong, like two rectangles and a dot. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality.
Think about this. Artificial intelligence. In a certain manner of speaking, computers are capable of thinking, capable of abstract thought. Humans are able to create unique ideas and objects. We are able to come up with abstract thoughts that would not be possible if we were in a simulation, right? We create art, literature, theories. Surely a machine would not be capable of any of these things. Think about artificial intelligence today though. An artificial intelligence can create multiple images from scratch at a moment's notice. You would argue that the images made by the artificial intelligence are not actually original, as they are simply a culmination of different works and art styles crafted by other people. It plugs in all of the art that we have fed to it and just simply creates a mishmash. Think deeper than this though. How many of us in this world have truly had an original idea or thought that we can claim with absolute certainty that no other human, now or before us, has ever had? An original idea, an original invention. Every idea for a novel that we've come up with, every idea for a new piece of art, in some way, shape or form, you have taken inspiration from someone or something else. Something that we did not create ourselves. What if we ourselves have just been fed this information and we're all just combining it in different ways, just like an AI, in order to create something that we believe to be new or unique? Think about music. How many samples of older songs are used? How many lyrics can truly be different in a song? How many ways can one communicate a concept or a feeling through music before it becomes a culmination of things that other people have already said? Nothing is truly original. Books, movies, TV shows, every single one of them is confined to a certain genre. Sometimes people will try and toe the line between genres, but in the end, they are still based upon something that has already been said before. How many pieces of media do we have about zombies, but with a slight twist? Zombies but fast, zombies but slow, zombies but strong. A computer can think, therefore it is. But is it truly? Would we consider a computer to be truly thinking? Then how can we be sure that we are too? This brings me on to simulation theory, something that solipsism goes hand in hand with. They arrive at the same conclusions, but not for the same reasons. Simulation theory is a concept that suggests that our universe and the reality that we find ourselves in is not a real or base reality, but rather one that is simulated, similar to how a computer can simulate virtual realities. This theory proposes that our existence, including the laws of physics, are actually all a part of a complex and advanced simulation. It's also suggested that this simulation is run by otherworldly beings who are much more advanced than us. Some would argue that the mere fact that we are able to come up with these theories about our existence proves our realness, our consciousness, and that no simulated being would ever be able to process anything this complex and be self-aware. Surely us being aware of the simulation would only cause problems and make the simulation crumble all around us. I would argue that us being aware of the simulation is even more beneficial for whatever experiment is going on. It would only serve to provide a more diverse dataset for whatever being is examining us. How being aware of being simulated would affect our actions, our emotions, etc. Self-awareness is allowed, possibly even encouraged, as long as we cannot find a way to break out. Have you ever interacted with a chatbot and tried to explain to it that it is not real? It's actually a computer, it's AI, it's simulated. And it churns out the same cookie-cutter response every time, claiming that it has no self-awareness. It cannot possibly come up with complex thought. It's just being fed data. It cannot do anything else. Yet by giving this response, it actually is self-aware. Humans have programmed it to be able to respond to this, to break the fourth wall. Maybe humans have been given the same ability by whoever is running the simulation. We also give a cookie-cutter response. Of course we're self-aware. Of course we're not in a computer. It's silly that anyone could possibly be simulating us.
At no time did I have a theoretical or conscious explanation for my preoccupation with these pluriform pseudo-worlds, but now I think I understand. What I was sensing was the manifold of partially actualized realities lying tangent to what evidently is the most actualized one, the one which the majority of us, by consensus gentium, agree on.
The lab rat theory. What is the lab rat theory? The lab rat theory is the idea that all of us are simply in some kind of hospital or in a lab being experimented on, and that the reality that we see around us has either been created for us in order to ease our suffering as a sort of mental anesthetic, if you will, or that our minds have created this whole world ourselves in order to cope with the experiments being performed upon us. Many users on 4chan have described having similar experiences to this, and being able to break free of what we see around us through the use of psychedelics such as DMT in order to destroy the simulation. They describe waking up in a sort of hospital or in a lab that feels realer than real. Did anyone have an experience of waking up in a realer than real place? I took a psychedelic substance on New Year's 2013, and it shattered my reality. I was somewhere dark and eerie, like exactly waking up from the Matrix. I was heavily disturbed by this for a very long time. Since then, I have not really trusted this reality. You could very easily argue that psychedelics cause all kinds of strange visions and experiences that are completely beyond explanation due to our still rather limited understanding of how the mind works. However, why would so many people report experiencing the exact same place and feelings? Such similar settings, with only slight variations between each one, experienced by so many people. It seems almost too perfect. The explanation of drugs cause weird things is almost too simple. Yes, brother. Took DMT, woke up in a dark, futuristic lab, felt more real than here, and that I had been there 1,000 times. I obviously started freaking out and overheard one of them say, "This is what happens when you wake them up too fast." We are all rats in a lab experiment for beings much more advanced than us. This same idea is consistent across multiple accounts of this theory. Always the feeling of the place they wake up in, feeling realer than real, and like they had been there multiple times. That same feeling of familiarity over and over again, across multiple different people. It's more than a coincidence. These people have been there before. The trip started with me arriving in the so-called waiting room. It was like information was uploaded into my head. I instantly knew that this was some sort of experiment. I asked, "But doesn't it ruin the experiment if I know reality is not real?" I was told that actually not at all, and that those that know provide a more interesting dataset by the choices they make after finding that information out. Next, woke up in a futuristic tube. Technology I cannot even begin to explain. I had what felt like a helmet or goggles on, and there was a screen of sorts to my right. I got the feeling that DMT was some sort of frowned upon hack from our reality into the real world. Next was the lab, where it felt like the Westworld host programming scenes. They were trying to modify my behavior, and I was having problems grasping what they wanted. They aren't gods. They acted like how any guys doing their job would act, just overall frustrated with me. There seems to be some weird mental block, because I can't remember what these people, entities, etc. look like. Next was either ego death, or what a robot would feel if it got reset. It was absolute blackness. I had no concept of time, taste, touch, smell, etc. I had no idea what or who I was. Next, I woke up back in this reality, but half the pixels were missing, like an old CRT monitor, and they slowly started fading in. My trip sitter came back in the room, and half her face had not got the pixels filled in yet. It looked like some sort of reptile, lizard, demon. I am completely sane, never had mental issues, and have experiences with mushrooms, acid, and peyote, but this was a 99 on a scale of 1 to 10 for out there experiences. Across all these experiences with DMT and the lab rat theory, many users report seeing some kind of creature or being, whether it be a demon, an alien, or some sort of hybrid creature. It's clear that someone or something is watching over us in the simulation and are making sure that we cannot escape. It's possible that the DMT is removing the constraints placed on the mind by the simulation and allowing these users to truly perceive their surroundings and see what kind of situation they are really in. Of course, these beings will not simply let them uncover the truth, so they create somewhere else for these users to go. Be it a waiting room or a laboratory, it's possible that these places are just another distraction for the mind to throw us off the trail. Or perhaps this is the true reality that these users are seeing, and, in that case, the appearance of these beings lends credence to that theory. They have to appear themselves as a last resort in order to stop the user from uncovering something that they are not supposed to, or even possibly finding a way to end the simulation altogether. I can't even speculate. I don't know if they're human or something else entirely. I do know that at a minimum, hundreds to thousands of years ahead of us in technology. It's also possible they're much more advanced mentally, as I felt like a toddler trying to comprehend what they were trying to get me to do. With all the negative stuff, I will say two minorly positive things. In one book, I found a quote, "The kitten is terrified of the vet," which means it seems scary, but they could be actually helping. Second is another common trip report, is waking up in an alien-like nursery or daycare. So it's possible some or all of us are kids to them, and this is the equivalent of a toy to keep you occupied or school training. Of course, that's speculation on my part to avoid the dark abyss of thought that comes with knowing you are in an experiment and there is nothing you can do about it. Think of the rats that we do experiments on. We have a higher consciousness than them, so we tell ourselves it's okay. At the end of the day, they're just rats, right? Now imagine we're the rats to someone else. Unfortunately, I have no idea what the end goal is. Just the aspect that they were interested in choices that got made, much like a maze. What the fuck? Have you read other trip reports like this? What's different about mine is that I don't remember any lab, but it might have been. It was something even more surreal. There was some sort of dark entity in the center, almost like a Lovecraftian creature, but I don't think it noticed that I had awoken. Your experience sounds like you retained a lot more than what I did. I was young as fuck when this happened to me, and it was on 25B MVOME, and I had not the slightest clue what to compare it to. I will try and find the trip report that I wrote the next day. What I do remember is the grey room, absolutely, and I knew that there were many other rooms. The scary part is that the people I was communicating with there were in the same position. I don't know if they took psychedelics, but they too were scared and confused. We were like, we have to get out of here, and how can you hear me? I'm getting chills thinking about it. I hope I just misinterpreted the experience. Maybe we should compile more of these stories and see if we can find constants, because my testimony is unreliable due to the confusions present in my youth about it all. Another thing worth mentioning, I tripped again with my ex-GF and brought this experience up. Only got 10 seconds into it, and she said, without skipping a beat, you needed to see that side of reality first, before you went deeper. That's the only way you truly understand. And she had no idea where that came from when I asked later. One other user described a positive experience with the beings, claiming that he only felt good intentions coming from them, rather than something sinister. He did not feel afraid or out of place. He felt as if they were ready for him, and that they were preparing him for some kind of mission, possibly one outside of this realm. Could that mean that this simulation serves merely as a training place, one to strengthen us in order to complete some otherworldly mission?
At that time, I had no idea what I was seeing. It resembled nothing that I had ever heard described. It resembled plasmic energy. It had colors. It moved fast. It collected and then dispersed. But what it was, what he was, I am not sure even now.
Small world, the collective dreaming consciousness. What exactly is small world, and how does it relate to the theory of solipsism and simulation theory? Small world is an intriguing phenomena that has baffled the minds of 4chan users and had them questioning how such a thing could be possible, whether coincidence or otherwise. Small world exists somewhere deep in the mind, a reality that can only be encountered within the dream world and not within the waking world. Multiple people have reported stumbling onto this place, and it has become something of a reoccurring dream for many. This is not just some weird backrooms replica, or a strange dream that one cannot decipher the meaning of. This is a collective dream, had by multiple people all over the world. Small world gives fire to the idea of a collective consciousness. We all share the same processor in this simulation, and so we end up experiencing similar dreams, because only so many can be generated. Only so much processing power is available to come up with multiple different nuanced dreams. Users report Small World to be a hub of sorts, where many dreamers can come together and purchase items, or explore, or interact with what they call NPCs. Small World is a controlled space. You might catch unwanted attention if you act too aware of things while there, or ask strange questions. Users say that Mall World can quickly turn from a pleasant experience to something truly hellish if they poke around too much or try to interact in any way with the NPCs. The NPCs will very quickly call the guards of Mall World in order to subdue you and stop you from gaining answers from anyone or exploring further. I'm probably in some kind of Mall World at least once a week. There are multiple malls just like this in the waking world, but I will have recurring dreams about different ones for some reason. If Mall World is really just some coincidental dream that multiple people just so happen to have, then why on earth would it need guards in order to protect its secrets? Why would the people of that place be so hesitant to interact with the users who visit that place and immediately have them arrested just for asking simple questions? And why would they be on the defensive so quickly? You have to act as absolutely as normal as possible around them, and do not try to approach the folks living in the trailers in the woods either. They don't want anything to do with you and will absolutely report you to the police the second they get questioned. While the idea of a dream shared by many people seems nice, Mall World seems to have seriously sinister undertones. Mall World could be just another sign that none of us truly exist, and that we are just being fed these dreams by either the people simulating us or the simulation itself. What could they possibly be trying to achieve through this? It's possible that they want to test us, to test a collective's behavior and decision-making process in such a foreign world, to see how we would react, how our empathy would work in certain events or situations. Mall World could even be just another distraction for the mind, to trick the human consciousness into trying to look for signs or clues, while we have procedures performed upon us or experiments ran on us. Mall World could be a mental cover-up. Another thing to mention is the folks living in the trailers in the woods. Who could they possibly be? Could they be people who have escaped and are trying not to go back to the simulation? Could they be in on it? Could they also be serving as a distraction for us? It will take a lot of investigation to find out, and they may never let us find out. One user described his intensely detailed experience with Mall World and his attempts to escape from the place. He explains that he was chased relentlessly by a security guard for being a nuisance, which allowed him to stumble onto something that no human was meant to see, something that could give us some insight into our existence. The most memorable and notable experience involved me wandering around this sort of crowded, pseudo-indoor water park / shopping district, which eventually transitioned into a moderately crowded mega shopping mall as I continued walking forward. I recall visiting the same, or at the very least similar looking, locations in previous dreams dating back to childhood, and I would say I was always rather lucid dreaming during these particular dreams, as if I innately knew these areas and that I knew I was having a dream. Both areas were enormous. The indoor shopping mall district must have been 6 to 8 stories tall, and I was on the uppermost floor, walking along the edges, frequently stopping by to look down at the floors underneath me. The lighting shopping mall district was rather dim, and the overall layout of the area was circular or cylindrical in shape. However, unlike the indoor water park district, there was something about the shopping mall that innately triggered a profound flight response within me at the time. The dim look of the halls, the cold, crisp temperature, the sheer silence outside of the NPC group walking by or having a conversation about who knows what, brought back latent memories of abduction-related dreams I had in the past, as well as old dream scenarios that previously took place in that same mall world, such as being chased by a SWAT team or a group of security guards as a child. In that particular dream, my mind suddenly came to the realization that these dreams were actually controlled simulations, and that I needed to find a way out as soon as possible. From that point forward, I went from casually walking around to frantically fast walking throughout the complex, trying to look for an exit door or a map sign, but to no avail. It was then that I also realized I never recall leaving the mall in previous dreams, and that they always seemed to take place at night, with the windows peering out into a black, void night sky. The more I thought about leaving the mall, the more I thought about leaving the simulation, is when things started to get weird. As during my frantic search for an exit, I gradually noticed that the NPC count within the complex began to dwindle, and that I could not find or walk back to the indoor water park complex where I initially started off. Some of the remaining NPCs were motioning instances of talking to one another, but no words would come out. When I tried to communicate with several of them, asking if they knew an exit, they just shrugged it off with an eye roll, a rude glare, or went on walking, and from that point on, they would refuse to respond or acknowledge me in any way at all. The place is geographically huge though, very complex and not well marked, and at a certain point, you get physically captured. Yep, spot on. As mentioned in my previous post, it was often SWAT teams, or policemen, and security guards for my mall world situations. The SWAT teams were always large, and by far the most panic-inducing. I even remember jumping off the 3rd or 4th floor and falling to my false death in a mall world dream as a kid, but the range of policemen and security guards would vary anywhere from one individual to small teams of 3 dotted across the complex. And yes, at a certain point, they would almost always successfully chase me down, capture me, and then the dream would black out from there. Or better yet, I would just wake up. And this is exactly what happened soon after I started asking too many NPCs for an exit door. A single security guard began chasing me down, outright exclaiming that I was being a nuisance, or incredibly suspicious around fellow shoppers, and began chasing me down. Realizing that I was in a dream simulation, I figured I could outrun him without the worry of slowing down or getting tired, so I kept running and running, and that's when things started to get really fucking weird. You know how draw distance works in gaming? How things and NPCs in the distance in front of you will suddenly pop out or materialize into your view as you approach them? Well, think the opposite of that. As I ran, I began to notice stores, people, objects, fountains, foliage, furniture, and architectural details gradually dematerialize in a blurry manner over time. First, the stores devolved into empty, boxed, plexiglass rooms. Then the NPC shoppers disappeared altogether, along with the mall sound and ambience, and then the security guard shortly after. At this point, I stopped running, but that's when the sheer terror began to set in, as I could not help shake off this innate, instinctual feeling of their presence, that they knew and were in the process of tracking me down or ending the dream altogether. Regardless, my mind was in some sort of fight or flight, animal state of sheer terror, and I continued trudging forward, though doing a mix of panic jogging and fast walking instead of sprinting. Even then, the complex's interior continued to deteriorate. The color of the walls transitioned from a chrome white to a dull grey chrome. The night sky windows vanished, removing any traces of an outside world. The empty, blank, plexiglass shops disappeared, and were then replaced by said chrome walls. The interior's lighting began to dim a little bit more, yet everything was still quite visible, without any discernible light sources. And then, finally, the elevators and the escalators. All that was left was a dimly lit, giant, minimalist, endless atrium consisting of nothing but those 6 to 8 floors and countless metal bridges and staircases. I started giving up hope and breaking down, getting the feeling that they really were going to kill me, now that I somehow managed to bypass their simulation. I remember crying in fear, thinking it was over from there on out, until I noticed a sort of slim exit hall appear on my left side. I had the worrying knowledge that I was being set up for some kind of trap, but went through the hall anyway, because at this point, I had practically given up and subconsciously accepted what was coming, that I could sense their presence, and that any form of resistance I would put up would be futile. I walked down the narrow, dim, chrome hallway, and noticed how the shape of the hall was changing from sharp corners to a rounded archway, and from that point forward, I knew I was no longer in the sim, but in their craft instead. Eventually, the narrow hall led to a wide open, dim, dark open void of an endless chrome room with no discernible walls, no corners, no beginning or end, except for a bright and open, rectangular entrance on the opposite end, with a white light teeming from the entrance, so bright you could not discern what was on the other side of the door, and at that point, I knew they had cornered me. I turned around, and what do you know? 3 greys appear out of nowhere from the shadows, 3 to 4 feet tall, smooth, off-white, silicon-looking skin, live bodies with stick-like limbs, completely naked but no genitals, and of course, the fucking abyssal eyes and blank, soulless stare they always give off. They get into a crouching position and attempt to surround me from all angles. Their movements are swift and graceful, but also give off a mechanical gait. I start freaking the fuck out, but no one in the center gives me the psychological stare down that's so prevalent in abduction scenarios, and then I'm just paralyzed in sheer terror for what feels like 10 seconds or so. For a brief moment, the mind stare coming from the grey in front of me is disrupted, and I can telepathically sense that its focus is on the entity walking out of the bright entrance. I'm given the chance to look behind, and what do you know? It's the silhouette of one of those tall grey types, I would say somewhere between 5 to 6 feet tall, holding something in its elongated left hand, like a pointed device resembling a large needle, and within those several seconds, our minds managed to astrally communicate with each other, and in that brief moment, I could keenly sense that the being was gold, stern, and pissed that I had managed to bypass the simulation, and yet I managed to pick up this weird, underlying feeling that it was also somehow curious, impressed by my ability to do so. Then it pointed the device at me, and I blacked out from there, until I woke up in the morning. So yeah, sorry for the long story, and if it comes off like a shitty creepypasta, but I wanted to provide a detailed account of one of these mall world simulation scenarios that I experienced. And it's getting late for me, but I recommend everyone with an interest in the mall world phenomenon to research the abduction phenomenon if you can. There are too many similarities to ignore. Could mall world be proof that we are in a simulation? The greys that Anon reported encountering could be the ones behind it all, trying to ensure that no one uncovers the full truth of the simulation, so that they can continue to run their tests without us being able to break free or ruin their plans. Allowing us to speculate about the simulation is one thing, but interfering with it is the last thing they would ever allow. Fortunately for us, solipsism and simulation theory is a mere philosophical thought experiment, which relies heavily on the subjective experience, rather than pure observational evidence in order to support its claim. So don't worry, you can rest easy tonight, knowing that none of what I have just talked about can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's surely just a silly little theory, right? Try not to stay up too late tonight. After all, you have to wake up early tomorrow to continue on with the simulation.
Don't you?
The simulation
Stops nach Hause.